Hey YouTube. Testing. One, two, three. Testing. 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 Sounds a little quiet. Hey Laura, welcome to the stream. Hey Haley, welcome to the stream. Thank you, Laura. Um, I hope you guys have plenty of questions today because I'm basically bereft of any real topic to follow. I'm once again winging it, flying by the seat of my pants. So I hope you guys have some questions. Um, how are the rope fish doing, Haley? And Haley, as far as visiting this weekend goes, we are both so sick with the flu. I was literally in the hospital the other night because of how bad this flu is. Uh, if it comes near you, avoid it at all costs. Don't breathe too deeply in front of the camera today. It's hey Daryl Deemer, welcome to the stream. It's a rough version of the flu. I'm still so yes, I'm in quarantine. You're gonna have to forgive me today because it's nasty. Nasty flu. It hit me like a ton of bricks. I did get out and went and saw Godzilla yesterday. My wife's brother's son wanted to go really bad and had no vehicle, so he conned me into going with him, and I wasn't highly impressed by the movie, but it wasn't as bad as I expected it to be either. So I'd say it's probably 3.5 stars. Godzilla, King of the Monsters, King of King of something. It was a fairly decent Godzilla movie, and I've seen a lot of them, and he's seen all of them, so he desperately wanted to go. King of the Monsters, yes. Um, Haley says I'm in a chat with the Nigerian doctor right now, so I'll be popping in and out. We are discussing the parameters of my trip to Africa. If I can pull off the money part, I should be good to go. Well, that sounds awesome. Um, you once again, from my Peru experience, you need to check very closely on what um, inoculations you need to go on that trip because you really want to take care of that. And it's much more expensive than you might think. In the good old days, you could get a shot for $10. Now they're 200. So, when you're figuring your money costs, please be sure to figure those costs for inoculations too, and you need them. Plus, you'll need to get your passport in order. I have my passport. It's a lot easier to do if you already have one and you just renew it instead of trying to get get a new one right off the bat. Yeah, and passport's not cheap anymore either. Everything everything is outrageously expensive now, and you just might as well figure it from the get-go. Anytime you're adding up the cost of one of these trips, and as much as I am making light of all the costs, I want you to know that I wouldn't have it any other way. That I think that's awesome, Haley. If you can find somebody to stay with, that will make it a lot easier. Um, Probably you're going to need some kind of armed guard to go with you. That might be a little more difficult to come up with. Thankfully, we didn't have to come up with that in Peru because we were part of a booked collecting tour that Go Wild Peru does it all the time, so it's not something way out of the usual order of things. But all of those kinds of things add up, and you start out thinking the trip's going to cost you $2,000, and then the plane flights and the extra taxes and the costs of your luggage and the cost of your inoculations and the cost of your Haley says, I have an actual Nigerian that will be escorting me around, and according to him, Nigeria is peaceful and safe, and the media just makes it out to be horrible. Well, I'm sure that that's true. I'm sure that for most of those people, their lives are not interrupted by violence all the time. It's just that in that area of the world, there are a lot of tensions going on over the oil, over the people that do the oil collecting, and over people that try to steal the oil. And when you get all those kinds of things mixed together, it can make for a volatile situation. It doesn't mean that it is. You could go on the trip and never have the slightest indication that there's anything bad going on there. So yeah, I can see that someone says, hey, look, there's just really not that much bad going on. Plus, where you're going may be far enough away from the oil fields to get you out of harm's way. From our view, in the sense of people in the United States looking on the news and seeing the Niger Delta, most illegal oil refineries in the world. It makes a volatile situation, however, not trying to see oil fields, just the floodplains. And that's true. That's an excellent point, and one that needs to be made quite clearly. It's easy and arrogant for us as Americans to say this and that without being on the ground, without actually seeing what the situation is. Just like me and the illegal gold mining, my first inclination was to rant and rave and do an endless series of posts about how horrible the illegal gold mining was, and it is horrible. There's no two ways around it. Until you get there and see the poverty that most people live in, and that illegal gold mining allows those people to make enough money to send their children to school, to live a slightly better life. And while most of the people that work on illegal gold mining probably aren't spending the money making their families' lives better, the great majority of them are probably single men, and they're spending the money on drinking and carousing and generally non-productive pursuits. But it's their money and it's their right to decide how they want to spend it. And it's a little bit stilted for us in the West or us in Europe or us in anywhere to look down our noses at what their lives are and make judgment calls about them. And it's the same way, I'm sure, in Nigeria. You know, those people, most of them probably have no connection with any kind of rebel activity or any kind of illegal oil collecting. They're just trying to live out their lives on the ground where they are and the place they call home. And that's the biggest thing, is that it's home to them, you know. So Haley says, I feel like our media hypes up situations that really aren't as big an issue as they make it out to be. Hey, Joseph, welcome to the stream, man. Um, Joseph, I've been hoping the best for your Nigra Cinctus. I haven't really heard from you, which makes me worry about their health. But I've been hoping the best for them, man. 0 parts per million water, yay. So your RO is actually working as it should be. I think mine, I replaced my filter a while back, my membrane, and I think mine's up to about 36 now. The water here is really hard and it tends to sediment up the filter, and I don't really have the good backwash system set up to clean that filter, so I'm all the way back up into the 30s now on my ppm on RO water. But the 30s are still good for me in the sense that it's still good for those fish. Joseph says he thinks he needs cupramine. I'm assuming that that's a copper-based treatment. Joseph, you know, in the old days that we used to just drop a copper penny in the tank, you know, an old copper penny, and that alone was enough to treat a lot of things. It just leaches a little bit of copper into the water. You know, that's old school stuff. If I'm digging through the gravel of an old tank, I'll often find a copper penny in it, or I've dropped that copper penny in there just to keep a slight amount of copper in the water. You know, copper's not really good for most fish, but it's pretty bad for most parasites and most maladies that affect fish. So unless you're running some shrimp or snails or some of those kinds of creatures, invertebrates, then you can usually just add a copper penny and it will help. So levamisol's not doing anything, and the same for salt. Man, that sucks if levamisol's not touching it. Have you pretty much narrowed it down to nematodes, Joseph? Are you pretty sure that that is what's causing the problem? I spent quite a bit of time looking in my fish disease books, running for his change jars. Yeah, and Haley's asking you, did you ID it too? Hey, Kenneth Ella, welcome to the stream, man. It's you know, a microscope is an incredibly useful thing, but until you're functional with what things actually are, hey Cody son, welcome to the stream. Until you are comfortable IDing what you're seeing, Okay. Well, get some gill scrapings. Get a gill clipping, Joseph, and check just to make sure you don't have something else going on and you're trying to treat one thing and they're dying from something else. Knock on wood, my nigrocinctus are still doing good. So I'm, nervous about what happened to yours because it could very easily happen to mine too. We're forcing these fish to live in conditions they're not really used to. We're exposing them to maladies and pathogens that they've probably never faced before because of the um, pH and the TDS of the water that they've lived in, how acidic it is, how base it is, and there's just a lot of stuff that can't survive in acidic water. Hey, Corona Ken, welcome to the stream. Yeah, I thought that was you, Ken. But welcome to the stream, Corona Ken. I'm basically talking about nothing, Ken. Haley's hard at work getting her African trip set up, and we were talking about some of the issues that come with trying to set a trip like that up. You think, and Joseph can add to this as well, that you sit and you think about what it's going to be like when you're there, and none of it really works out. It's like trying to be ready to be a parent for the first time. You can read all the books and you can do all the thinking about what it's going to be like to be a parent for the first time, and you're never ready. The only thing that gets you ready is actually being a parent for the first time. And then you begin to understand the kinds of things that you really need to take into account for. And it's kind of like that, or at least it was for me, to go on that Peru collecting trip. I sat and thought and thought and thought and bought river shoes and thought about buying nets and thought about this and thought about that and what if I bring this and what if I bring that. And the truth is, Haley, my suggestion would be that awesome, Corona. Ken, Haley, if you're still listening, and I know you're probably still talking to your doctor, you need to get a hold of Ken here and talk to him. He designed and trained some of those Nigerian refineries in the 70s and 80s. Some of the towns didn't have names, and that sounds about right. That's Ken may be an extremely valuable resource for you. He may be able to give you some phone numbers and potential contact people that might give you a leg up on this trip. So I would highly recommend that you get to know Ken. Ken's a great guy. He bought me a hamburger when I was fresh off the plane from Peru, and I was needing a hamburger. As much as I enjoyed eating all the food in Peru and how wonderful it all was, having a nice big thick hamburger was pretty dang good when I got off the plane. We had a hard time connecting. We were just bouncing around in that airport, the two of us, and we had a hard time finally meeting up, but we both managed it, and I was really happy. I was supposed to meet up with IFG on the way out. Pakuru barbecue, yep. Joseph, I made you eat most of my pakuru. It was good, but I didn't like it that much. And I didn't want to be ugly and say, ooh, I hate this. You're always supposed to show your host that you're enjoying what they offer you. And I ate enough to where I enjoyed what they were offering me as much as I could. Now there were several other things that I would have eaten all of yours. Yes, I got to enjoy a couple of hours in Newark, Ken. I got to go outside and smoke, and believe me, at that point I was pretty. Haley says some of the places are more defined by the tribe than the city name, from what I understand. Yeah, that sounds like you're sounds like you're going to walk into an interesting situation, Haley. Um, Anytime you do something like this, anytime you decide to go and make up your mind to go, regardless of whether you can afford it or whether it's a good idea or whether it's a great idea, anytime you do something like that, you stretch the boundaries of your experiences. You will find yourself growing as a person. You will find yourself learning to value things in the world differently because of another person's perspective. Joseph says he has contacts in Zambia. Well, Joseph, with all of the safety net that we had in place going with Go Wild Peru, tell Haley how we felt when we finally met up with each other in the airport in Lima and we couldn't get a hold of anybody. We couldn't find a ride. We couldn't find the taxi. We couldn't find anything. We were there in Lima, Peru, and could not make contact with anybody. And we felt pretty darn lost. Joseph says he was scared, and I was too. I mean, I was not frightened, but I was concerned. I was worried that we wouldn't make the connections that we were supposed to make, that we weren't going to hook up properly and get to the flights like we should have. Cold, cloudy, and lots of people. It was a lot of fun, Joseph. As miserable as moments of it were, it was a lot of fun. Standing in those customs lines just blew me out of the water. I was just really Haley says, I'm anticipating a level of terror in my soul I've never experienced, but I'm excited to see how I operate in that situation. Yeah. And Ken's telling you that he's outdated, but I'm not so sure how much 40 years, the 40 years that have passed for you, for that area, Ken, are probably more like 15 years passing in the U.S. because that place is still pretty much running on a timeline that is much different than ours. I'm sure they have cell phones, but I bet that they're still operating in a platform that is 1960-ish. And I may be showing my ignorance here by saying that. It's possible. Yeah, Lima was kind of dirty, but it's old, Joseph. Lima is a super old city. That place has been there for a lot longer than most American cities have, a lot longer than a lot of European cities have. There were people living in that spot, 4,000 or 5,000 years ago. Boy, don't ask Joseph to go, Haley. He'll show up. Joseph loves to go to the wild. Africa might be a little bit outside his range, but he's got his shots and he's got his passport, and he's closer to Africa than yeah. Yeah, a lot of times governments do hold their people back. Uh, it's easy to stand outside and look and make pronouncements, and they're probably not deserved in all cases, but yeah, sometimes governments are a big part of the problem. Joseph says African plane tickets are some of the most expensive. Yee. $3,500? Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's not a. Now Haley's looking for a sponsor. Yep, that's gonna be a planned out. You can fly to Thailand for 800, but it's 3,500 to Africa. Well, 1,800's not too bad. If you can get in and get out for 1,800 and don't get stuck on a 4-day delay, or the flight never makes it, or one of those, fly-by-night things, that's pretty decent money-wise. Compared to 3,500 it is. Killifish. I'm not sure that you're going to find a lot of betas in that area, are you? The Niger Delta? Yeah. Okay, you got me at killifish. I think Joseph has learned to love what's on the ground where he's at, and that's probably a good lesson for all of us. That you go with Thailand, yeah, Thailand, you definitely will, but you go with preconceptions of what you think is there, and then you suddenly have your eyes opened as to the wonders of nature, in the sense of just how many species are there in the wild and what kinds of species they are. Um, you know, most of us that are old school, that have been around for a while in this hobby, we're all kind of Rift Lake based when it comes to Africa, what we know about, what we've learned about, what we've seen talks about, what we've studied, the fish that we've kept. Most of them, not all of them, but most of them are Rift Lake cichlids and some of the Rift Lake catfish. And so a lot of the focus, the old joke was that the ACA, the American Cichlid Association, a lot of us back in the 60s and 70s called it the African Cichlid Association, because that's mainly what was going on. All the people in the ACA were mainly all gung-ho African cichlid collectors and keepers and learning about, because that was all the new stuff. Yes, I know, Haley. But many of us that were in the ACA were mostly interested in South American cichlids and South American fish. And we were kind of shoved off to one side for a lot of years because the African contingent was so strong. So a lot of us that cut our teeth in the 60s and 70s on fish, we learned Rift Lake. You know, there was always crebensis. There were always a few fish that came from other locales in Africa, but most of what we got was Rift Lake stuff. Now you can get fish from all over Africa. People are fishing and collecting in all those wild rivers in Africa. Africa's got some of the most incredible rivers in the world, and as much as the rivers in South America are incredible, Africa has got some incredible rivers. There's a couple of rivers in Africa that no one knows how deep they are. It's like there's a rift opened up underneath them, and no one really knows how deep they are. So, you know, you're dealing with a landscape that is relatively untouched as far as people knowing exactly what's going on in all of these locations. And going to the Niger Delta, although it's been done for hundreds and hundreds of years, it's not been done. You know, my suggestion, Haley, would be to take as much testing equipment as you can figure out how to get in. You know, maybe a pH kit, TDS pin, temperature, so that you can get some real solid readings on the water parameters, and the water qualities, where you're collecting at. Rather than take a whole test kit, I took test strips. They're not really as accurate as a good test kit is, but it gives you a generalized feeling for what the water is. And Haley says she's testing the hell out of that water. I actually made Joseph test water. He was not happy about it. You could hear him growling in the entire little video where he was. I made him do water tests. I made Corey do water tests. I even made Dean do water tests. Unfortunately, like an idiot, I hit the wrong button when I was filming Dean doing the water test. And that was where we got the green golds at, too, the one we needed the most. But I remember a string of the readings that we were getting. So Dean and I pretty much worked out what the test was that Dean took, even though I didn't manage to film it. I've got the very end of it. When I thought I turned it off, I actually turned it on at the very end of Dean doing his water test video for me. So, and yeah, it was a lot, but we also remember the river where they were the dump trucks were getting rocks. It was like 45, and the pH was like 7, and so in some places it was a lot harder and a lot more like normal water than we expected. Haley's going to bring a microscope. Well, a microscope's going to be a pain in the butt to tote around, Haley. You'd probably be better off to get one of those little There actually is a company now that makes a microscope that is made from plastic and paper, and it just has these little lenses, but they've managed to make it useful up to a certain degree, and you can get one for $1, and you buy the kit and you basically punch it out and put it together, and you can use it then. And it's made for all of these countries, you know, for science, for kids, so that they can all have their own microscope. And it's not as, of course, nice as an actual microscope is, but it is a functional microscope, and I think it's to like 400x, and you could figure out what's in the water. You know, you could get scrapings from wild rope fish. You could get water. You could get muck. You could get plant material rotting on the bottom, and stick it in that little microscope. But I'd look that up, Haley. $1 microscope, and look it up, because it is an actuality that someone has actually created a little portable, cheaply made microscope. I'm not sure how much stuff Flip sponsors. Um, your best bet, Haley, is probably through one of the larger companies, someone that will connect you up with people. Corona Ken says he lost me. I'm here, Ken. I'm here. Is my video stream health not doing good? It's showing orange. Let's see. No data, no active stream. Okay, Daryl Deemer still got me. But my stream health is showing that it's not good. National Geographic sponsor you. Yeah, I'm afraid places like National Geographic. If I were you, I would write to Heiko Blair. Heiko Blair has addresses. Heiko Blair, some people will know how to contact him for you. And I would write to Heiko Blair and say, Heiko, how can I get sponsored to do this? Yeah, Nat Geo is probably really tough. I tried writing for National Geographic in the early, well, I guess it was mid 60s, and I really ran into a wall trying just to get my articles and photographs in front of someone in National Geographic. My father took my brother and I and one of his friends on a whitewater canoe trip. We did the Mississauga River in Canada, which basically runs northward from from the south, just maybe 600 miles above the border to the United States, and then You got Heiko Blair to comment on one of your posts? Oh my gosh, Joseph. Color me jelly. Well, Haley, there you go. Go on Joseph's forum and find where he commented and respond to his comment and ask him. Ask him what you need to do to get this off the ground, to get it sponsored, because Heiko's been doing this his entire life. He knows the ins and outs of doing that sort of thing. Um, I would get in some of these African forum groups where people are talking about fish and collecting fish in Africa, and read until your eyes fall out and figure out who knows what and start talking to them and asking them the same questions. I mean, you can come at it from an outsider's point, Haley, and do it any way you see fit. You know, if you can get a flour company to sponsor you, you know, Gold Medal Flour or King Biscuit Flour to sponsor you to go to Africa to check out rope fish, then it's all good. It doesn't matter where the money comes from. It's just you need to know some of the ins and outs. And by not having done it already, that makes it more difficult to do it now. So, you know, people say, well, show us your track record. And if you don't have any track record, then they're going to say, well, we don't know what you know, you may take the money and never even go. Well, that's obviously not going to be the case, but don't be afraid to think outside the box. Don't be afraid to push yourself on people. You know, the only stupid question is the question that's never asked. And so I would, you know, don't be rude or ugly to people. Don't try your best to make enemies, although sometimes that's handy too. Haley says, okay, I got to get ready for work and send an email to Heiko. Thanks for all the info, Dwayne. I love having an intelligent friend base to bounce ideas and info off of. You go, girl. You go, dragon. And hug Lucas for us. Yeah, we're probably running up on close to an hour here. I thank you guys for once again giving me enough things to talk about to get by yet another video without really having a topic to go by. I think that there is a certain amount of preparedness that's mandatory when you try to do a trip like Haley's talking about doing. But I also think that there is a certain amount of you can never prepare, or you'll never think of the right things to prepare. So a lot of it is just flying by the seat of your pants until you've done it a few times. Like, I feel like I would be a little better equipped if I went to Go Wild Peru again, but that's not necessarily true. What I think sitting here at home might work out best in the wild might not work out at all. Those shoes that I spent hours and hours and hours and hours researching and digging on, I wore them twice and they're still down there in Peru. So if someone down there needs them, they are welcome to them, because I discovered that my feet hurt so bad because of all the rocks that we were walking over. Basically, we were walking through rock gardens down there, most of the places where we went, and my feet hurt so bad because of the thin soles of those river shoes that they were basically useless. I mean, They weren't useless. I could have continued to wear them. They would have they stood up really well to it. It's just that they weren't, it's hard to know what it's going to be like actually when you get someplace like that. You have these preconceptions about what you think it's going to be like. And now, like for going to Peru, I have preconceptions of what I know it was like for me, and I would think that I would be better prepared in the type of gear that I took with me, in the types of things that I bought that I now know back then were useless, and I ended up throwing away once I got down there, that I would replace them with something else, and yet even what I would replace them with might be just as useless. So it's really hard to prepare for a trip someplace in the wild where you don't really know how far you're going to have to carry these items. They all look well and good when you looking at them on Amazon, but then you get them and you start stacking them up and you realize how heavy they are, and you start looking at your luggage and thinking, how am I going to cram all this crap in there, and do I really need all this crap? And you don't want to go with not enough stuff. You don't want to get on the ground where you're at and have to buy all new stuff, because one, it's probably going to be pretty expensive, or two, you're not going to be able to find what it is you're looking for. So it's really a balancing act to try to figure out exactly how to prepare for something like this. That Haley's talking about going to Africa on. So it's a good thing to go through in your head. It's a good thing to try to wrap your mind around what it would be like to just pull up stakes, and tomorrow at 8 o'clock in the morning you're going to get on a plane, and day after tomorrow you're going to get off a plane and you're going to be in the jungle in Africa, or you're going to be in a swamp in Africa, thousands and thousands of miles away from anything that you would recognize as civilization, from a Starbucks, from a McDonald's, from a 7-Eleven. It's people have been living in that way for thousands and thousands of years, and they never had access to a Starbucks or a McDonald's or a 7-Eleven, and they get by just fine. So it's obviously possible to exist there, and it's incumbent on you to try your best to recognize what you need to do to survive like the natives are surviving. To use the kinds of things that the natives are comfortable using, and in doing so, if Haley gets to Africa and no one has a net, and when they get ready to start catching something, all of them start gathering reeds and weaving them into baskets. Yep, be like the natives, Joseph says. If the natives are weaving baskets to catch fish, then maybe they got 1,000 years experience that says, if you want to come here and you want to catch fish, this is how you do it. And so a certain amount of your thinking needs to be outside your normal box, needs to be outside of what you think. Hey Pam, welcome to the stream. we're just been me blathering on about all the different stuff people have been talking about. So it's not like you missed much, Pam. Uh, hey, Mr. B. I didn't see you in there before, and Cody's son, I think I said hi to you already. If I didn't, I apologize. Um, it's it's not cut and dried. It's not, you know, putting yourself in a situation like us going to Peru, even though we were under the auspices of Go Wild Peru, we were still in a situation that we had very little experience with. Awesome, Joseph. Yeah, you can really see the eyes under a microscope. Um, Joseph probably had as much experience as any of the four of us did when we were going collecting. Although I say that, but Dean had already gone collecting. Dean had been on the trip, the previous 2 years, where they did the river on the boat. You can see the heart beating. That's awesome, Joseph. Daryl says he's going to have to do his fish collecting at Aquashella. Well, that's probably a good place to collect fish, too. Yeah, Dean went to Iquitos and did the riverboat collecting. So Dean had more experience collecting than I know I did. I mean, I've gone fishing before, and basically that's what we were doing, was going fishing. But it's a little bit different when you're in a whole new area and a whole new kind of situation. And you just need to think outside the box a little. All the kinds of things. You know, I was really concerned that unless I spent that $300 and bought that fancy Heiko Blair dip net, that I was probably going to miss some really good fish. But that wasn't the case at all. These dip nets you can see in the picture, they worked just fine. You know, we jammed them into the mud. We jammed them into the bushes. We jammed them into the leaf litter. We jammed them into the rocks. We set them down between the rocks in the heavy flow rivers where the V's were between the rocks, and disturbed the big rocks to make the plecos jump into the net. That stuff can be made to work. So you gotta think about it a lot before you go, and then let all that go if that's not going to work, and be ready to improvise or go native or whatever the situation requires. All right, guys. I'm feeling pretty much under the weather today, so I'm going to make you let me off a little early today. Thank you for hanging out. I hope something in this wandering, rattling old man's yammering is helpful to you, and that is interesting enough to be paid attention to. Guides and transshippers. Yeah. I think Haley needs to get a little bit deeper than guides and transshippers. I think Haley needs to go to the people that have been to Africa before. Yeah. Thanks, Daryl. And I hope none of you guys get it. This is a particularly pernicious and nasty version of the flu. Kaler's Aquatics, sorry to be bumping you off as you just get here, but thanks for dropping in, man. You guys have a good rest of the weekend, and happy Father's Day to all you fathers. Please know your value and that you deserve recognition. All right, guys, I'm out. Good luck.